have you here. What did you make about the? What did you think of the Prime Minister's comments on China?
Kia ora, thank you for having me on the show. Yeah, his comments were very diplomatic, and he stated again, as previous of our leaders have done, that about New Zealand's independent foreign policy, that we will work with China where we can, and that we. But I was very interested to see actually that he said that we will say, if necessary, in public, the things that we disagree with on China. That was good to hear that we're not just doing things behind the scenes.
Right, so taking a public position. If you were advising him on China, what would you say?
Well, the Prime Minister has inherited a relationship with China that has become increasingly complex for New Zealand, particularly China's actions in the Pacific are a real concern for New Zealand, as well as foreign interference and espionage in New Zealand. So it's a top national security priority for New Zealand right now, and China is the main state actor engaging in foreign interference and espionage in New Zealand. So that makes it really complex. It's also a major trading partner.
Absolutely, there's a real balancing act there. Is the threat of war or the prospect of infiltration within New Zealand economy and society, which is the more dangerous?
Well, for New Zealand, we're immediately dealing with the challenge of foreign interference and the impact on our democracy and the impact on our communities, such as the overseas Chinese or New Zealand Chinese community. So that's something that our government's addressing immediately. But we're also really looking to our region, the Pacific. That's our top priority in foreign policy. And our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our previous Prime Minister Ardern spoke up very clearly about concerns on China's military presence in the Pacific, particularly last year about the Solomon Security Treaty with China, but also Wang Yi, the Chinese Foreign Minister, coming into the Pacific, asking 8 of our Pacific partners to sign a security treaty that would exclude Australia and New Zealand. So those are really big developments in China's behaviour in our region as well as in our country. Yeah,
but also in our region, we have our nearest neighbour, our closest ally, Australia, signing up to nuclear submarines. Now, I mean, that seems like a really big development. I know they're not until 2030, 2040, but that sends a signal, doesn't it, to China that they have taken a stand. Does that raise the temperature a lot?
Well, the Australians have had submarines for a long time. They have a much bigger military than we do.
These are nuclear subs that can go further out and be deployed throughout the Pacific and even up into East China.
Yeah, the submarines could already do that. And they had invested in French submarines and then decided that they weren't fit for the purposes that they required. So it's a capacity that Australia has that we don't have.
So is too much being made of that?
Well, AUKUS is a capacity agreement. So yes, I do think too much has been made about. We should be looking to, the question you should be asking is what happened at the trilateral meeting, which was only a couple of weeks ago between New Zealand, Australia and the United States. That's much more important. How are we coordinating with those 3 partners, and what was the topic of conversation? If you could have got the Prime Minister to talk about that, that would have been interesting.
What should have been the topic of conversation there, do you think?
Well, I expect that all 3 were talking about the security situation in the Pacific, and also they would have been talking about the war in Ukraine and concerns there. I mean, there are concerns with China as well. There's news that came out of a Politico report about Chinese companies providing military support to Russia now.
Yeah, well, that's right. And also now we've got the Chinese Premier going to Russia to visit Vladimir Putin. I mean, is that another symbolic cementing of where China's going in terms of supporting Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the CCP, Xi Jinping will be visiting Russia soon. And last year, Russia, or Xi Jinping and Putin, made it very clear that they object to the rules-based international order, which is, and they say it's not for them, it doesn't suit their interests. Well, that's what maintains our security. Our security relies on the rules-based international order, that there is a level playing field, that small states like New Zealand can have their interests represented, that might isn't right, isn't the rule. And, you know, the situation that our country is facing didn't just happen yesterday. government advisors in the Ministry of Defence or in MFAT have been advising our ministers about concerns about this for a long time now. We've got public documents stating that.
And you've been advocating to diversify away from China as a trading partner and create trading bubbles with other people. Are we just finally, quickly, have we done that enough to ensure that we have resilience should this all turn pear-shaped?
Yeah, well, interestingly, that was a policy about diversifying our trade that came up in the John Key administration. It's common sense. When you're doing business, you don't put all the eggs in one basket, do you?
No.
You've got to spread the strategic risk. That was the basic understanding that we were supposed to have learned when the EU entered to the European Commission, that we should not be dependent on one market. The challenge is always in getting more countries to take our goods, and New Zealand is trying very hard to get more FTAs and trade agreements. But we should also be de-emphasising our trade with China. We shouldn't be putting more money into promoting it and developing it further. It's just, in fact, in an acute imbalance. 48% of Maori enterprise, which is 31% of primary industry, are exporting to China. So that's a really serious statistic.
OK. We're going to leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much. It's a developing situation, as always. Professor Anne-Marie Brady, thank you very much for your time. Muri Akane. Coming up next, Marama Davidson with a sneak peek of the